20th century has witnessed an exponential growth of international organizations, and this has had a significant impact across a wide spectrum of issues, ranging from international relations to human rights to climate change. Since the end of the Cold War, the world has witnessed numerous instances when these international organizations have played the role of a mediator, a regulator, and of a policymaker, thereby directly influencing global affairs.
This new era, influenced heavily by globalization, has affected the cultural, economic, social and political fabric of the national and global order, and posed a plethora of challenges for international organizations and the frameworks which regulate them.
For the international organizations of the day to be more effective and efficient in resolving this evolving crisis, it is imperative to introspect and analyze the major challenges they face. This short documentary will therefore explore these issues in relation to three major international organizations: the European Union, the ICC, and the Greenpeace.
The conflicting and negative reactions against the international organization policy implementation and decision-making is the first challenge this documentary will assess. This reaction comes from a variety of sources, including citizens, NGOs, political parties, member states, and even other international organizations. For example, here at the European Parliament, where major decisions pertaining to the future of Europe and the world are voted on, legislation have been implemented which have provoked criticism from various quarters. This was illustrated throughout the immigration crisis, where the EU faced competing calls from its members to take action. Countries like Germany stresses the need for the EU to remain committed to upholding universal human rights and providing help to those in need, while others, such as Hungary, made call to restrict migration and place further limit on the right of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers.
Beneath state level, nationalist political parties across Europe, such as the National Front in France and Italy's Northern League, have also been critical of the EU, blaming the Schengen zone for the ease with which many migrants have travelled from the southern states to northern Europe.
These criticisms are not limited to the European Union alone. The ICC has increasingly been condemned by many of its members when it comes to exporting global justice. South Africa has accused the court of double standards in regards to its rulings, and prominent academics have argued that these double standards are merely a facade to export Western neo-imperialism. While international organizations can never gather the full support from every member for their policies, negative reactions to decisions place a strain on the collective cohesion of these organizations, which in turn can cause a breakdown in their abilities to function. This is an important challenge faced by all international organizations, one that they will need to overcome.
The second major challenge identified in this documentary is the ability and capacity of international organizations to deal with global issues. Non-profit organizations like Greenpeace lack the power of states to implement legislation directly, and so attempt to influence policy through raising awareness and campaigning. However, if a policy is unpopular or does not adhere to a government legislative program, it is often met with resistance. For example, in 2013, the Russian government ordered its special forces to seize, remove and arrest the boats and the crew of the Arctic Sunrise, a Greenpeace boat that was protesting against the exploration program of Russia in the Arctic on the charges of piracy, despite the fact they were in international waters. Greenpeace was unable to stop the drilling, prevent its boat from being stormed and its members being detained, as it was not in the Russian government's economic interest to acknowledge their concerns, and it lacked the power to deter them.
However, state ignored the ruling or wishes of international organizations is not limited to non-profit and non-state basic organizations. It also affects the state basic one. In the context of the ICC, the verdicts summoned and warrants against state leaders are often neglected and not adhered to. One high-profile example of this is the Kenya's government, who in 2010 refused to extradite Omar al-Bashir, accused by the court of masterminding genocide in Darfur. they argue that their own strategy interests were paramount to that of the court, and so the court ruling would be ignored. The inability of international organizations to influence or enforce its decision on its members in the case of the ICCs or on those within the wider international community, as with Greenpeace, illustrated how difficult it is for international organizations to gain unity in policymaking and ensure the issue affecting the international community are dealt with effectively.
The third major challenge facing international organisations are the significant administrative and capacity deficits, very often resulting from their founding charters and frameworks. At the ICC, where nation states and country heads are put on trial, the court is hampered by a range of issues, including the duplication of procedures, structural introversion, and the role of the veto of the United Nations Security Council. This applies in particular in relation to pre-trial and trial, which in turn affects the destiny of the defendants. This, combined with the rich and full docket of the ICC, is criticised as an attempt to do too much at the same time, instead of having a lesser and better prepared cases.
Greenpeace, being a non-state actor, faces criticisms related to intervening and attempting to influence state policies. And sometimes states react by initiating legal actions against them, as in the case of India and Russia.
Perhaps one of the greatest challenges facing international organisations is the supremacy of state sovereignty.
Though the number of international organizations has increased significantly and states have continued to be part of their ventures, the policy directives are often ignored when it's in contrast with the national objectives and interests, or at times they are violated for political convenience.
This is illustrated clearly with regards to the International Criminal Court, where major global powers such as China, Russia and the United States of America have refused to join, arguing that its rulings undermine their own justice systems and sovereignty.
There has also been a backlash from political parties and individuals against international organisations, which they deem to be undermining national sovereignty. Over the last decade, the EU has experienced a sharp rise in populist and Eurosceptic parties. The National Front, who promised a referendum on French membership of the EU, recently made the second round of the French presidential election, securing 35% of the vote. In the Netherlands, the PVV, a far-right Eurosceptic party, secured 20 seats in the Dutch parliament, while in Poland, the ruling Freedom and Justice Party have repeatedly clashed with the EU on what they perceive to be interference in its national affairs.
Finding a balance between the interests of state and that of international organization is a delicate act. If the state refuses to accept decision, policy and procedure, they can render an organization obsolete. Likewise, if international organizations push their mandate too far or attempt to simply impose their will on a nation state, it can increase their resentment toward that organization or even persuade the state to leave it.
Get our country back, we will get our independence back, and we will.
Brexit means Brexit.
International organizations, are state-based or non-state, irrespective of their functional nature, faces a plethora of challenges. This short documentary has therefore assessed and analyzed four most pressing issues faced by the international organizations and put them into perspective and context by using examples from three prominent global institutions: the Greenpeace, the International Criminal Court, and the European Union.
The challenges discussed here are the conflicting and negative reactions against the policies, the struggle of these organizations to deal effectively with these global challenges, significant administrative and capacity deficits, and the state interest receiving priority, which perhaps poses the greatest challenges to the international organizations and the one which perpetuates the other problems.
These four challenges, though not an exhaustive list of issues, do represent their most pressing concerns.
If the international organization are to perform their intended functions,
Whether it's ensuring that the international law is fairly and justly implemented,
Tackling climate change and our effect on the environment,
bringing nations closer together economically or politically,
They will need to find a way to deal with these challenges, overcoming them, or at the very least, reduce their impact upon their functionings.